Hi, this is Brent Adamson from Gartner. As we work with heads of sales and heads of marketing in the B2B space around the world, trying to understand the top challenges they're facing and how to address them, one of the things that we've come to really understand and appreciate among all commercial leaders is just how hard it is to manage a commercial funnel in today's complex landscape. But let's face it, it's all really hard as we build that MQL, the marketing qualified lead. We pass it over, we hand it off to sales for the sales accepted lead, the SAL. I often like to call that phenomenon, right? The MQL to SAL to NMP, which is marketing qualified lead to sales accepted lead to. Not my problem, because let's face it, if you're in marketing at that point, you hand it off. It is no longer your problem, and you pass it over to the sales organization, and you say, go get them, sales, and when in fact that sale falls apart, then it's great being in marketing, because you look at it and say, well, it's not my problem. I wonder what happened. Gosh, sales, you're having a bad year. But in fact, what we find is this is everyone's problem. Because it's turned out whether sales or marketing, it doesn't matter. Finding out ways to better, more efficiently, more effectively progress your customers through that funnel turns out to be really hard. It is a huge challenge for all of us. And as we talk to sales leaders around the world, that is one of the single biggest questions we have is, what can we do in sales? What can our individual sales representatives do to make that happen more effectively, more efficiently? When, let's face it, we live in a world where we have less access to those customers than ever before. And now I've got a really tough question as a head of sales, don't I? Which is, how do I impact that progression when in fact I'm not there in person to have that kind of impact? So these are the kinds of questions that we've been studying in our sales practice, trying to understand what is it that we can do with, for, to our sellers to position them to have that kind of impact on the progression of opportunities as they move through our funnel. And you know what we found in doing this research is actually something really interesting, that in many ways, the better way to think about this question isn't from the selling perspective or from the marketing perspective. The better way to think about this entire challenge is from the buying perspective. Because as hard as it has become to sell in today's world, it has arguably become even that much more difficult to buy. The single biggest challenge of selling and marketing today is not selling or marketing. It is actually our customer struggle to buy. The place we've got to start is not with our sellers, it's not with us, but it's with our customers and their organization, trying to understand what's hard about buying. This year, we did something we'd never done before. We applied what's called a jobs to be done approach to buying. And when you do that, what you find is that B2B buying coalesces around 6 different jobs. 6 jobs that customers have to complete to their satisfaction in order for them to successfully make a purchase decision. Now, why do these jobs matter? Well, these jobs matter because once you identify these jobs in qualitative research, you can begin to test them quantitatively. And when you do that, you find 2 really interesting things that change everything for all of us. Because the first thing you find on these jobs, with a jobs perspective, is when you ask customers, to what degree did you revisit any given job as part of a purchase process, you find over 75% of customers revisited each, if not all of those jobs at some point in a purchase process, leading to what we call looping. What is looping? It is simply an acknowledgement of the reality that customers don't move in a purchase along a straight line. Truth to be sure, there's a beginning and an end, but the way they get from that beginning to that end is almost anything but a straight line. As we've built this machine to drive progression, our customers aren't moving in the straight line that progression dictates. Now, the other piece of data we found when we looked at jobs is equally interesting, is when we asked customers to consider the channel that they are most likely to use, the channel of information that they are most likely to use to complete that job, what we found is they're just as likely to use digital channels as in-person channels for any one of those jobs. And what's interesting is they're likely to use both of them at a heavy level. But if they're using both channels, so in-person and digital channels, to make all that work happen, and we've set up an organization in a very different way, then we are no longer, as a supplier organization, aligned to how buying actually happens. Because you think about how we're aligned right now. We got first the marketing, then the sales, first the digital, then the in-person. It's what I've come to call the serial commercial engine, where marketing finds the demand, qualifies the demand, nurtures demand, and then hands it off over to sales, who then pursues it in person. And so what we have to think about is, what does the world look like when we start thinking about buying not so much as a progression, but we think about it in terms of completion. And you start asking really tough questions like, where's the handoff in that world? And the answer is, there isn't one. The way that customers buy today tells us there is no clear handoff from digital to in-person. There is no clear handoff from marketing to sales. It's all part of the same thing. And when you think about it from that perspective, it raises a question, how can we help buyers buy in this world? And the answer isn't so much we help buyers buy through digital and then we help buyers buy through in-person. Rather, we help buyers buy through information. specifically the kind of information they need to complete their jobs more effectively, more efficiently, and more confidently. And knowing that all of those jobs are happening at the same time through multiple channels simultaneously, that tells us the first thing that we have to solve for as a supplier organization isn't sales rep excellence. It isn't digital excellence. It's information excellence, building an infrastructure of information, specifically what we've come to call buyer enablement information. Buyer enablement information is the specific kinds of information that your customers most need and are least likely to find to help them complete each of those 6 jobs through whichever channel and at whatever time they seek it. And if we can do that commercially as a sales and marketing collaborative team, a commercial organization, build that infrastructure of buyer enablement, which we then deliver through both digital and in-person channels simultaneously, we are now in a position to be far more aligned to how buying actually happens. And the payoff from getting that right is potentially huge. We find that the organizations that align around delivering the kinds of information that customers need to complete the jobs they're seeking to do at any given time are 3 times more likely to win what we've come to call a high-value, low-regret sale. These are the kinds of questions that we've been studying very deeply over the last year at the Gartner sales practice, and for that matter, the Gartner marketing practice as well. And we're sharing with heads of sales, heads of marketing all over the world. If you're interested in engaging us in that conversation, finding out what buyer enablement actually looks like, how to build it, how to deploy it, what it means for your sellers, this is the kind of stuff we'd love to talk to you about. If you're interested, reach out and give us a call.